I know that I've been pretty distant and in and out. I, I know that it's been very confusing what's been wrong with me, what's been going on in my life, and all this jazz. So I'm just going to get straight to the point. And last year was really, really emotionally draining and stressful for me. My husband lost his job, not because of something like layoffs, but because of drugs. Just plain and simple. And what he originally told me it wasn't. And when I found out the truth, it turns out that pretty much the whole group of people I knew were doing drugs, and not something like smoking weed, but some of the hard stuff. And that hurt a lot, because I'm not about that. I'm not into that kind of life. I'm already fucked up as it is. So I don't take drugs to get even more fucked up. In fact, I'm the type of person that if I take drugs, it would actually make me, um, I guess certain circumstances would make me feel normal, and other ones would just make me even worse. So, anyway, when I found out what my husband really lost his job for over whatever, it really hurt. Emotionally, it really fucked me up. And it wasn't just like, oh, I'm so sad. I mean, I was up at 3 a.m. crying alone, because I was just so upset. Not even almost about the drugs as much as just being lied to. He wasn't going to tell me the truth, he was just going to keep it to himself. And even worse was that it wasn't even the first time he had done that. At least the type of drugs that he had done. He had done it behind my back before, years ago. And that's what made it hurt even worse. And, then we lost it all, and having to live off his retirement at a point where, inflation was at an all time high. It still is ridiculous. It sucked. And thinking about all of it now, I think back on 2022, and all I can just really remember is that it was just so hot. It was hot and stressful. And, because that's what I was going through. And I was so stressed out and so emotionally fucked up. It had been, and still is, or was, really hard to work on this channel, as maybe stupid as some of you might find it to sound, you know, this is my life's work. This is what I want to do. And, at least when it comes to, I guess, leaving a legacy behind, this is what I want to leave behind. This is what I want to do that hopefully maybe decades from now people can come back, reference this, and be like, yeah, this was actually really useful. She was really helpful for this, that, and the third, I guess. So, unfortunately, because of stuff in real life last year, it had been so hard to work on this and to focus on this channel and to get back with you guys and to really do what I wanted to do. You know, it was so hard to even get out of bed, because thinking of how long I had been lied to, you know. And when it came to that relationship, there were so many times where I was like, is this even the person I thought I had fell in love with, The person that I thought I loved in a way really just didn't even exist because I found out, hey, he had been lying to me. So, that's the transparent part, number one, of, you know, hey, like, where have I been? Well, at home, fucking crying or upset and, just emotionally trying to get through this bullshit, you know. And what really hurt is like, okay, here I am busting my fucking ass to get, not even just this channel, but other stuff in real life. You figure your bills and your paperwork and this and that, doing your taxes, paying your mortgage, all that kind of shit, the actual adult shit that a person needs to do. I'm the one that's doing it. And all of that stuff that happened last year really made me realize how uneven the relationship had been and how much, you know, um, I had been doing just to make sure that, in a sense, we were alive. Here I am making sure, like, the bills are actually paid. And, you know, this is, you know, like, having insurance, like actually making sure the things that adults need to do and what we need to have in order to have a comfortable life, that was all up to me. And on top of all the other things, just like chores and this and that, and you know what I mean. And so, I realized that I gave up. So well, I had to forego so much of my happiness just to make sure that essentially we were staying afloat. And it was so emotionally draining. It really fucked me up. And like I said, it was so hard to even get out of bed. I mean it. It really was. And I've learned that, you know what? Fuck it. I'm not going to do it anymore. Right? I'm not going to basically baby someone just to make sure that he's comfortable. I'm just now at this point doing shit for myself, working on my own thing. Um, so, in that regard, that's where I've been emotionally, had been. I'm a lot better now. I've healed a lot more because I'm at the point now where I'm like, you know what? I don't give a fuck if I have to do shit on my own cut because in a way I already have been, you know. So, and so there was that, and that emotional part of being like, oh, okay, so I've been lied to this whole time. That took a huge toll, of course, emotionally. And I think because of how stressful that was for me, how bad last year ended up being, I ended up sick a lot. I think it's just I had stressed out my body that fucking much that I kept getting sick. And I'm like, oh my God, like really again and again and again. And so what ended up happening was that with all this chaos going on last year, um, August and September was really bad for some reason where like every other week, like I was getting sick and then I get better. Then I get sick again. Like all of August and September, it was like that. I don't know what it was. I had taken, a COVID test and it wasn't COVID either. And I was like, what the fuck am I even sick with? Right. And I still don't know what all of that was about. But anyway, I was fucked up. So September finally stopped getting sick every other week. And then a month later in October, I woke up and I felt like I had water in my ear and like my face was swollen up. I had noticed my face was sort of swollen. And I was like, what is going on? I looked it up. It was probably an ear infection. I was like, oh man, I hope it just goes away. And of course it didn't. So November, I went to the doctor, got ear drops, and they worked to a point, but essentially it wasn't enough for, I guess, how infected my ear was. And so it's like, here we go. Here's the ear infection arc, the ear infection saga. And so I waited like a couple of weeks. It didn't get better on its own. And then I went, excuse me, in December back to the doctor, technically a different one, but still in my network. And sorry, sorry, that's just dinner. Anyway, uh, I went back to the doctor, and this one, a different one, had prescribed me the antibiotic doxycycline. She's like, if this doesn't work, you're going to have to go to an ENT. And I was like, okay. And I didn't want to go to an ENT. I was like, man, please let this work, please. And it didn't. For whatever reason, I still don't understand this. The doxycycline did absolutely nothing. I don't even know what was up with that. So, whatever. And so, I believe it was like a couple weeks later, 2 weeks later or so, give or take, um, went back to the doctor again. And this time, I went back to my normal doctor and I told her, look, so far this is still here. I don't know what's going on. And so my normal doctor was like, well, let's try a different antibiotic pill and the ear drops. So we did the ear drops again, and then we did a different antibiotic pill, azithromycin. And the azithromycin worked to a point, but once again, it wasn't enough. Like, literally, like, after basically taking the 5 days worth of that pill, there was still obviously some infection left. Um, and then after that, I guess because of that, the bacteria that was still there, it came back and it was even worse. And like, my head felt twice as bad than a month before that. And I was like, oh my freaking God. So, what was it? After the azithromycin, um, I was just getting really fed up, of course. It's like, okay, here we go, 3 times of antibiotics and nothing's happening. Or it goes away to a point. It's like, here's 80% of it gone, but there's still some left. And that, like, 10 to 20%, comes back with a vengeance, of course. That's how antibiotics and all that bullshit works. And um, so after that, I was like, oh my God, why won't this go away? I am so sick of this because since October, I had been hearing either my heartbeat or, fluid or the blood rushing, and I told my doctor that. I was like, what am I even hearing at this point? And she's like, well, there is water in there, but you might also be hearing the blood flow from your carotid artery because your ear is swollen enough that it's just resting, on the carotid artery. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Great. Love hearing about that, So after the third round of antibiotics didn't get rid of it, I was getting fed up, obviously. And, it sucks to admit this, but I ended up taking a fourth round of antibiotics that wasn't even prescribed to me. My husband had um, something on his shoulder, a cyst that was supposed to be removed in December, and because the local clinic is stupid and didn't, I guess, look at their own schedule, they scheduled my husband to have it removed on a day that the doctor wasn't even working. So he didn't have it happen, but he still had the antibiotics, to get rid of, that cyst after, any remaining infection, blah, blah, blah. So he ended up not taking that antibiotic. And I was like, my head is hurting. There's still water in my ear, and this infection will not go away. So I was like, fuck it. The worst that could happen is that nothing happens. Really. So what I ended up doing was taking that. I took the remaining 26 pills of cephalexin, an antibiotic technically used for skin stuff. And lo and behold, that pretty much got rid of it. And I say pretty much because I was still getting headaches a little bit. So, I go back to my doctor and she's like, oh, well, there's no infection left. There's no water in your ear. I was like, okay, well, I'm still hearing something. And she's like, oh, well, here, let's just put you on a steroid so any remaining fluid can come out. Okay. Well, that didn't do really much of anything. And in the meantime, I was hoping to, finally just go to an ENT to be like, look, have somebody look in there. So, in doing that, waiting to get, the call to have, an appointment with an ENT scheduled, about, I guess, a week after that, the ENT that my clinic referred me to called me one morning and said, we can't take you because we don't take your insurance, and also we don't take cash. uh I guess we'll just call your doctor and tell them that. And I was like, really, you're the local ENT and you don't take the most popular fucking insurances in the state? Well, like, what the fuck are you doing here for? Really? So anyway, so that sucked. And then I tried calling my clinic back, left two voicemails on 2 different days saying, hey, I need to talk to a nurse about getting another referral for another ENT. What do you know? Nobody fucking called me back, right? And so there I am, still having like a headache, still having pain, still hearing water or my heartbeat or blood rushing, and I'm like, I'm in pain. I'm taking, on top of that, fucking Benadryl and, you know, Flonase and, all this allergy stuff that's supposed to help, like, your station tube, like, open up and all this shit, buying, some sort of, like, fucking sinus blowing air in your shit kind of gadgets. And it's only getting so far, right? So I ended up one day I was like, I'm in too much pain. I'm fucking sick of this. And so I was like, I'm just going to go to urgent care. Because actually, the day before, it was on a Saturday, because I bought one of those home otoscopes, those things doctors use to look in your ear. So I was like, I asked my husband, I was like, can you look in my ear? Because my head is really hurting. And he looked in there and he's like, yeah, it looks like the infection has come back. I was like, oh my fucking God, really? So that next day, Sunday, I try to go to urgent care. The first one I went to was like, well, it'll be $900. It's like, what the fuck? So obviously I didn't go to that one. And so I waited for the next one to open up. Half an hour later, go there. Thankfully, the doctor knew that something was definitely not right. And, because just looking in my ear and I guess, and then she wanted to take a culture. And so in trying to take a swab, it hurt because my ear was so swollen, you know. Obviously, something wasn't right. My ear was swollen to hell. And so um, she had asked me what antibiotics I had been prescribed. And I was like, I've taken, the ear drops twice over, doxycycline and azithromycin, and none of them have obviously gotten rid of any of this. And she had asked me, has anyone prescribed you amoxicillin? And I was like, no. And I could tell that the look on her face was like, why would nobody go for amoxicillin? And she had even said that that's usually the first thing people go to, you know. And I agree, amoxicillin, really? Like, I would have thought that too, honestly, because most people think of penicillin and yada yada. And so So thankfully, she had prescribed me that and a different type of ear drop. I believe it was called a ciprofloxacin, and it did seem to work. Eventually, at probably about the last 3 days worth of the amoxicillin, I felt like it wasn't doing too much. I was like, well, shit. But I was like, okay, let me just kind of wait it out, see what happens. Because if I was in pain, like really bad pain again, then I would just go back to the doctor because what else can I do? So I do that. I wait, and thankfully I did. There were no more headaches like that anymore. So the amoxicillin definitely did its job. And to kind of fast forward in the story, um, surprisingly, there was nothing that grew in the culture the doctor took. But I can only assume it might have just, I don't know, maybe she didn't get enough for a culture. That's happened to me before. I've had a pap smear and they had to call me back because they didn't get enough cells the first time. So, excuse me. So, anyway, they had told me that nothing had grew in the culture, but at the same time, too, taking the amoxicillin and the ciprofloxacin seemed to have gotten rid of whatever might have been left. And now I really don't know what the infection was, unfortunately. Um, I mean, I looked it up, it could have been streptococcus, staphylococcus, morixella. And I'm like, okay, so what bacteria would have been eliminated by amoxicillin or and slash or cephalexin but not doxycycline, because that's the one thing that I still think about. Why didn't the doxycycline do shit? Because that antibiotic did not do anything. But anyway, and so after the urgent care episode, part of this saga, I ended up, what was it? Having to call probably a few days later my local clinic and ask him what the fuck is going on. Why hasn't anybody called me about an ENT? And of course, nobody called me back then. So I just had to make an appointment. So I did that. I told my doctor, look, nobody has ever called me back. And I told her how the first ENT office had, told me that they were going to call my clinic and leave a voicemail and all that stuff. And my doctor was like, there doesn't seem to be anything in the system, blah, 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 blah. And so, anyway, I told my doctor, and she was like, okay, obviously somebody's not doing their job. And, she apologized. She gave me her own personal phone number in case, I needed help like that again. Uh, and then I told her, look, I've already looked in my network for an ENT. Here's their information. I guess just refer me there, please. So, long story short, it happened, but I had to wait another 2 weeks to hear anybody call me back about that because, I had to send forth, but nobody at my clinic told me they sent it forth. And the ENT office didn't fucking call me either. And I'm like, can y'all like just get your shit together just so we schedule the appointment and all that shit? But of course not, right? Fucking, like, people did their job would be too fucking easy. And so, eventually, 2 weeks later, after that, I finally see this ENT. And the dude was a douchebag. Like, I don't know what the fuck his problem was. Because I had told him, I'm not a bitch. I'm not a Karen going to these doctor's appointments being like, oh my God, give me all the pills. Like, no. I was at the point of I just want to know what the fuck is wrong with me. What the fuck is in there? Why had it taken so long for this shit to even slightly get better? And now, the day before I saw the ENT, I had finished the last pill of amoxicillin. So, understandably, there wasn't anything in there. When the ENT looked in my ear, he was like, "Oh, there's no infection." Da da da. And I'm just like, okay. I mean, I just finished amoxicillin, so there's probably nothing in there. But of course, I told him, I am still having like the headache. You know, my head is still pounding, and I still have, obviously, I guess, the swollen eustachian tube. And he's like, well, let's do a hearing test. Da da da. You're going to be with us this afternoon, so you're going to have to, but you're going to have to wait 40 minutes before we do the hearing test. And I was like, oh my fucking God, 40 minutes just to get this hearing test that I know is useless because I can, I don't know how to put it other than I can hear. It's just that I also hear like my heartbeat on top of it, if that makes sense, you know. So I couldn't help, I started tearing up in the lobby. I'm like, I came all this way. I drove like 2 hours away to see this fucking doctor. And for what? For him to tell me there's nothing wrong? And now I'm doing a hearing test that I know is fucking useless. Because it's not really solving the problem of why am I still hearing, the heartbeat? Like, just why? Why did this even happen to begin with, right? So I couldn't help it. And thankfully, the hearing test lady saw me pretty early, and I couldn't help it. Like, I was really tearing up. And she's like, what's wrong? And, I was like, he told me that I didn't have the ear infection, but I'm still in pain, and all that jazz. And, I started crying because I'm a sensitive person, honestly. And, it, I had to like let it out, and we took a break. And, I was even like at the point of like, oh my God, I feel like a fucking idiot, right? But, if you can understand where I was coming from, at that point it had been 4 months, because this whole ear infection saga started in October of 2022. And by the time I saw the ENT and I was fucking crying in the office, it was 3 weeks into February. 3 weeks into February, and the dude takes like a 10-second look at me and tells me there's nothing wrong. It's been 4 fucking months. I've been on like 5 different antibiotics, and you have no idea what could have even caused what happened to me. And that's what really bothers me. The doctor was pretty dismissive, like, well, there's nothing there now. And I had asked him, I was like, so what could have caused it to begin with? You know, and because so I do the hearing test, and what do you know? Everything's fine, right? And so eventually I go, they take me back to a different room, and I wait for the doctor, and he comes in, and he's like, well, your hearing test is fine. And I was like, okay, so, what now? What do we do from here? And he was like, well, I don't really understand why you're taking out your frustrations on me. And I was like, I'm not, but I'm sorry if I'm conveying myself that way. I'm just a very matter of fact, straight to the point person. And especially with this, for having dealt with this for so long, I really want to know why this happened to begin with. And I want to know how I could prevent this from ever happening again. Because I don't want to go through that. Who wants to go through hearing their own heartbeat for 6 fucking months straight? It fucking sucks. It's weird. I don't like it, but I'm not in the medical profession, you know. And and I was like, okay, so there's no infection now, but I did just finish the amoxicillin from urgent care. So, I just can't help but be curious, after all these antibiotics and this and that, what gives? And I had asked him in the same tone of voice, you know, I'm like, what do you think could have even caused it? And he threw his hands up in the air and he's like, I don't know what could have caused it. Really? Fucking really? You're the doctor. And ironically, looking around, the room, there was at least four different plaques on the wall saying, oh, best, ENT in Houston 2019, 2021, this and that. It's like the best ENT in Houston can't give me an idea why my ear infection bullshit lasted this many months. Really? And so, like I said, and he was like, well, being dismissive, and I had told him, well, I'm not trying, to be an asshole. I really just don't understand why this even happened to me. I don't know if maybe it was a sinus infection that moved up through the ear, from the eustachian tube, that kind of deal. Because that's what I had read and I had heard about. And even one of the other nurses in the past had told me, is a possibility. And, so there I am talking to the ENT about it and saying, maybe that could have been it. And he just didn't even want to humor that contention. And I'm like, really? And he's like, well, were those other doctors that prescribed you those other antibiotics ENTs? And I was like, no. And of course, he had a smirk on his face, like as if that proved something to him. And I was like, okay, it's just like, why are you being a fucking douchebag? Are you butthurt that I was crying in the office? Which kind of doesn't make any sense, but anyway. So, he just, I don't know why, he just didn't want to hear it. And I'm like, and I told him, I was like, look, I'm not an ENT myself, but I do have a degree, so I kind of have this idea of, how we're supposed to do things in the scientific theory and how we're supposed to, at least hypothesize what may have caused this. And if we go to the, if we look at the conclusion, maybe we can backtrack to see what was, the beginning, what caused this to start with. And I'm like, of course, he didn't want to hear that either. And it's like, what the fuck is wrong with you, dude? Seriously. And I'm not the type of person to be like, oh, I have a degree, Like, if I ever say that, when I said it there, I felt cringe. I'm like, oh, I'm cringing even saying that. But sometimes you have to say that kind of shit just to get somebody to even fucking listen to you, right? And the thing about me is going to the doctor's office, I don't dress nice. I just dress casual. I live in Texas. It's fucking hot here. Even in February sometimes it could be, almost 80 degrees. So, like for me, I'm the type of person living in the South, I'll wear flip flops, shorts, and a t shirt, if not a tank top. And that day I was wearing a t shirt. So yeah, it's like I'm not wearing a business suit. I'm not wearing a fancy dress. I don't know why doctors act like that. Makes me a fucking idiot. But anyway, that guy had emotional issues, and I was like, look, I'm not trying to get to you. I'm not trying to upset you. I just want to know why this even began with. And he was like, well, I mean, I see a counselor for things, so I don't let things get to me, da da da. And I thought to myself, like, what the fuck, dude? Excuse me. Like, why are you even telling me that? Why are you telling me that you see a therapist because, you know, there's patients that get on your nerves, I guess? Like, dude, you have got emotional issues. But anyway, so what he ended up doing was prescribing a nose spray because I guess that's the most he could really figure out what to do. And, and looking at it now, it's like, yeah, I guess the nose spray could have worked. I'm still taking some of it now, but so far, nothing has really changed. And now it's the beginning of April. Um, I don't know, I still have probably about half this bottle left. I don't know how many ounces it is. I don't know. I mean, I have half a bottle of this Ryaltris nasal spray, but if I take off my headphones right now, I could still sometimes really hear like, my heartbeat. And I'm like, okay, so whatever fucking is going on is not really being fixed by this stupid ass nose spray. Okay, my eustachian tube is still very obviously swollen. And the reason I know that is I'm now thankfully at the point where I am, I guess, healthy enough to where when I yawn, definitely a big yawn, I yawn, a really big one pops, that ear because it's my right ear. And, I could hear, the eustachian tube like open up and pop. And, for a little bit, just a tiny second, I don't have to hear that stupid ass, heartbeat and all this shit. And even finally, a family member had looked at me one night and they were like, yeah, I could actually see that that side of your face is a little more swollen. And I was like, thank you, thank you. And that's the thing I just didn't understand. That ENT, he like didn't even touch my face, because I was like, if you just touch my face, you would be able to feel, you could feel that the left side was normal, but the right side was swollen. And so that was the whole ear infection ENT saga, that I don't know if all of the stress from 2022 just caused me to get sick that much, which I think it did, which caused me to be sick enough to get an ear infection that took months to ameliorate, which even still that's not resolved completely. And and honestly, that's where I've been, dealing with, you know, people wanting to get high for stupid fucking reasons, and douchebag doctors that I guess barely want to do their fucking job. I don't know, you know. So when it comes to that, that's where I've been, and it had been really hard, especially when I didn't even know what the fuck was going on with me in my ear, So pretty much anything from January and February of this year, 2023, if somebody watches this in the future. Um, I was still going through it, some of it was still with the infection and my head would fucking hurt. And I know I only made like a couple of videos in March of this year. I wanted to do more, but, emotionally, it had been pretty tough to be like, okay, I want to do this. And then I kind of don't get the chance. And I don't really want to talk about my relationship because unfortunately, there's people who know me in real life that watch this fucking channel. But they probably won't even watch this, whatever. But my point is like, I've seen how so much of what I have had and done in this relationship has been very one-sided. And I'm not afraid to say it. And half the time, like I really have wanted to record for a long fucking time, but then the I guess you would say items, the things that I use to record with would be taken by someone else because they're doing their own projects. And I'm like, okay, can I have my stuff back? Can I please just have my things? Can you please find your own thing to use? Because this is mine. This is part of my setup. This is part of what I do, and it's just stuff like that where I'm like, oh my God, can I please just have my own thing? Can I please just have my own space to do my own shit? Quit taking my fucking stuff. Quit like, I don't know how to put it. I mean, I sound like a child complaining about it, but it's like, look, you know, you have your shit, you have your friends, you have your recording bullshit. Why the fuck do you want to use my things? Please. It's just a lot of shit like that where I'm like, basically, to put it like this, because of what had happened last year, unfortunately, I guess I've had to mature a lot more than I really wanted to. Not that I was immature, but I think you kind of know what I mean. And on the other hand, I feel like, I'm looking at somebody and I'm like, dude, grow the fuck up. Like, that's just all I can really put it as. There's a lot of times where even now I'm like, grow up. Grow the fuck up, you know? Like, you know, like I said, I'm not trying to put all of my business out there, but there's just been a lot of things that's like, oh, I gotta take you to the doctor because, you know, now you're having this health bullshit going on with you. And, oh, it turns out it was something simple that I told you not to be doing anyway. If you just went to the doctor, like once a year, you could have probably figured that out. So anyway, I'm not trying to like just talk shit, but it's like, look, guys, this is what had been going on with me. That's what has been going on. All that. And I didn't even intend to fucking talk this long. Let's see, right now this is about 1,200 bars, which 2,000 bars is about, I think, an hour. So 1,000 is 30 minutes, give or take. So anyway, you know, thank you for listening to this, and thank you for listening to me in the meantime with all my old shit and all my old content. You know, I really fucking mean it when I have wanted to do shit in the past. I wanted to do a lot more in March, but like I couldn't. It's like, I couldn't do what I wanted to even in March, where I was feeling a lot better emotionally and physically. Because, like I said, it's like, okay, other people decided that they wanted to use my stuff, you know. So, the way that I have had been recording, like the books, the John Wayne Gacy book, and all that kind of bullshit, I use a microphone with an XLR cable and an interface. And somebody decided they wanted to use my interface and then just kind of not ever give it back. And I'm just like tired of that. So I don't have anything against USB microphones, but I was like, well, I already have the interface and my XLR. I guess I'll just wait for them to give it back. But here I am waiting and they never do. So yesterday I just went to the fucking store and bought a USB microphone because I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Fuck it. I don't have to worry about somebody taking my shit. You know, I could just plop this fucking thing on, at a USB C, not the micro. Sorry, not micro. I mean MIDI USB, because I have whatever. Anyway, I'm not getting into that, but that's where I've been. And I hope you understand where I've been coming from, and I'm so sorry that honestly that I had to put you guys through this. I really do mean it because I've been wanting to come back for a while. I mean, why had I been gone for so long? Really, a lot of that was because of the fucking ear infection, you know? So, thank you for sticking with me through this time. I really mean it. I really do. Because I'm just like, what the fuck was that bullshit? You know, to me, it's easy. I figured out a long time ago, 10, 15 years ago, um, there's no reason to play life on hard mode. There's no problem with playing life on easy difficulty. As in, don't do drugs, don't kill people, don't do stupid shit, right? Don't be stupid. That's the mantra I live by for the most part. Don't be stupid. Keep it simple. Stupid, you know. But other people don't seem to understand that. So, through a lot of emotional, spiritual, I guess, soul searching, however you want to call it, through a lot of my own emotional growth and all that jazz, um, and finally, health wise, getting decent, I'm definitely in a much better place to be back here and record and, engage with you, talk to you guys. Because, I really like it. I really like talking to you. I appreciate you guys. I really do. Um, Granted, I don't know. One thing I've had to notice, and I'm almost done, but one thing I've noticed and really had to come to terms with is that, uh, I have to be really careful, I guess, around people now because I've noticed that ever since COVID, I seem to be more susceptible to getting sick. And, even though I'm very healthy, like my lab work is really great, thank God. Um, Even though I'm healthy, I actually do have an endocrine disorder. I have an autoimmune disorder called Graves' disease. So, simplest terms, I have thyroid disease, and ironically, like at the age of 10, I pretty quickly became like an overweight child. And granted, part of that, of course, is like, mom cooking unhealthily and all that kind of stuff. But I was overweight as a child, teenager, and then um, really pretty randomly at the age of, I think it was 17, I got quite thin. And I knew that something was wrong with me, but for whatever reason, my mom didn't want to take me to the doctor. And eventually, my senior year of high school, it's like, I was like, something is really wrong. I know it is because I was really skinny and I, my heart would beat so fast. And I would wake up and my heart was racing. I know now that I was having heart palpitations. I would wake up in the middle of the night because I was having heart palpitations. And I'm not doing anything at all, just living my life, and my heart's beating all crazy. And I'd been to the emergency room a couple of times. And so at the age of 17 years old, almost 18, but it was like February 2011, went to the ER. My dad took me, and the doctor was like, "Oh, you have pleurisy." And so I guess at some point I might have had pneumonia that went untreated, that, developed into pleurisy, basically a sort of like swollen thing with the lining of your lungs, blah, blah, blah. They literally prescribed on the paperwork fucking Tylenol. I was like, oh, okay. But of course, because of that visit at the ER, they wanted me to follow up with my regular doctor. So a week later, follow up with the regular doctor. She's looking at me. She looks at my neck. She touches it. And I'm like, what? And they took blood work. I don't even remember getting blood drawn, but whatever. They took the blood work. And then a week after that, they called my parents up saying, oh, yeah, she has hyperthyroidism and Graves' disease. And so Graves' disease is what caused my hyperthyroidism. My thyroid went into crazy fast mode. I don't even know back then what my TSH was, but it was obviously so fucking low. It's so weird to call it low, but for the sake of it, let's say that my thyroid was so hyper. It was so fast that I really would eat just anything and still lose weight. It was actually kind of hard to keep weight on, ironically, after being an overweight child and teenager. Um, but, I was at the point where, I couldn't even walk to the bathroom without my heart racing. You know, that's how bad the palpitations were. And so I mean, I remember I even went to going to the doctor, and they, you know, I guess take my heartbeat and all that kind of stuff, doing all the tests on me. They're like, yeah, don't do any physical activity because you are at risk of a heart attack. I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, so don't go out and play basketball or anything. I was like, okay, I guess I won't. So I was, um, I graduated high school and I was just kind of sitting on the computer all day until finally we could get, you know, the treatment going. So I had to get radioactive iodine and, um, so that basically deleted my thyroid. um, so now, of course, I'm hypo and I rely on Synthroid for my metabolism and all the other stuff. But the point of all that is that I do have an autoimmune disorder, and I don't know why. I think maybe it's just because shit sucks now. I think just after COVID, certain type of I don't know, illnesses, bacteria, cold, flu, all that bullshit. It's like the flu season is even worse. And so for someone like me, I've noticed in the past year, since August of last year, um, when my family or just people I know, friends and family get sick, and then I get sick too, they're sick and it's whatever. But now I get sick and it is worse. And in fact, my my husband was sick, August, of course, last year, and then I got sick. And I was I was really sick. And then um a couple of weeks ago, I think my husband or my son was sick, and of course I got whatever they had. And then I got pink eye after that too, and it's like, what the fuck? Okay, like what am I supposed to do now? Like, I'm just trying to live my life, but I don't know, like, am I just that more susceptible now? Or are people just like spreading super bugs from not washing their ass? I don't know. But anyway, my whole point with all of this is that I seem to be more susceptible to certain types of fucking cold or flu or pink eye or this or that. Um, I have an autoimmune disorder, so that probably makes me more susceptible because of that, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, that's where I've been. That is what has been happening to me. But thankfully, I am in a much better place emotionally, mentally. Like, I'm ready. I want to do this. I'm ready to, let's get down to business. You know, I want to do this. I'm ready. Let's do this shit. Let's move on. Let's go forward and let's get some shit done because I am so fucking ready. You ready with me? Let's get some shit done, right? So that's it. Medical bullshit, emotional bullshit, people being dumb as fuck and stupid as hell. That's what's been happening, right? And as for where I'm going, just so you guys know, I mean, I'm going to finish the book. I'm going to finish John Wayne Gacy. I got to go back and finish Cat's Cradle, Kurt Vonnegut. But that's not hard. That's one of my favorite books anyway. And then, of course, I'm going to do a video on Ennis Cosby and other stuff. There is something going on in real life with a person I knew that ended up killing somebody. So hopefully I can actually talk about that soon. Yes, that is real. I'm not fucking lying. And other than that, the only other place I'm going would be to the bathroom.